Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Way of Prayer. In today's video, I'd like to talk about Lectio Divina, which is also known as sacred reading or divine reading. You may be wondering what this refers to. It is a practice of prayer that was developed primarily in the monasteries as a private devotion for people. And what it does is it takes a passage of scripture and breaks it down and gives you several different ways to approach it, or several different steps. On my other page, Weekly Lectio, I lead people through the traditional 4 steps in a very linear approach, but it's perfectly okay to move back and forth between them, depending on what you need at the present moment. So here I'm going to describe the 4 steps of reading, reflecting, responding, and resting, and I'll be elaborating on each of those. So as you gain, as you get better at doing these, feel free to use them however works best for you. You can mix them up, you can do them in different orders, you can go back and forth from one to the other. So the first step is reading. So select a passage of scripture and read it slowly. What I like to do is do this primarily on the Gospels lesson that's coming up for the upcoming Sunday. So it's best to keep the passage short, perhaps just one parable from the Gospels or an episode from the life of Christ. Read it several times and just notice what captures your attention. More often than not, there is something there that you need to hear. Then spend some time in silence, just focusing on the word or phrase that captured your attention. So then there's the next step, and that's reflecting. Classically, this is called meditation, or in Latin, meditatio. But it is not meditation in the sense that a lot of people think of when they hear that word. A lot of modern people associate meditation with Eastern religions, clearing your mind and such, being Om or something of that nature. And that's not what we're talking about. There is a much older sense of the word meditation, which just means to think deeply and reflect on a particular subject. That's why I'm using the term reflection. It avoids some of that confusion. While reading, it deals with what the passage is about. Reflecting deals with the so what. Why is this important? Why did the writer include this detail? What does it say about God, humanity, or even myself or my relationship to God? Are there areas where I'm falling short? How does this fit in with other scriptural passages? All of these are great questions to ponder during reflection. And again, like the last step, just take some time for silence afterwards. Let it sink in. So reflecting will naturally lead into the next step, which is responding. Responding is where we offer our prayers to God and offer them in a way that's very informal, but very personal and very intimate. There is a time for formal prayers, and there's a time for informal and intimate prayers, and this is one of them. Whatever the reading and reflecting stirred up in you, offer it back to God. Talk about it. If you feel confused, you can say so. If you're challenged, do the same. If you're grateful, offer gratitude. At its core, prayer is about a relationship with God, and you can't have a relationship if you don't communicate anything. Just think of any relationship being a romantic relationship, a marriage relationship, a friendship. The more you communicate, the deeper the relationship is going to go. So the more honest you are at this stage, the better. So here's just one example. I was doing an exercise this morning on the birth of Christ, and it just struck me how the entire majesty of God was present in this little newborn. And I had just visited a family who had a child recently, and so this little baby was just a few weeks old, and seeing how tiny and fragile he was. And I couldn't reconcile the two. How could something so magnificent and huge and amazing be also so small and helpless? How could these two coexist at the same time? So my response and my prayer to God was, wow, I am shocked and I'm in awe. I don't know how to take all of this in, but thank you, because you promised that salvation comes through this little baby. And yet here I am. That's the art of responding. It's giving things back to God and speaking back to God. So the final step is resting. Again, classically, this is called contemplation, or in Latin, contemplatio. And it's about being completely receptive. Don't try to speak at this point. Allow your thoughts to come and go, and simply rest in the presence of God. The other 3 steps should have prepared you for this part. If you are thinking of prayer as a conversation, you would have spoken and shared during the responding phase. This is the time when you receive and listen. It can be difficult at first because God often responds in very subtle ways. Just think, for an example, think of the prophet Elijah when he was up in the cave and there was a whirlwind and he didn't hear there was wind and he didn't hear God in the wind. There was thunder, he didn't hear God in the thunder. But he heard God in a still, small voice. Thomas Keating in his writings would say that God's primary language is silence. So in order to listen to God, you need to be quiet for a while. Just be quiet, listen, and enjoy God's presence. So those are the 4 steps: reading, reflecting, responding, and resting. So how much time should you spend on each step? One perspective is to spend as much time as you need to, which is very ambiguous, but it can be very useful. But sometimes we also need more structure, so I'll make some suggestions, and these are just suggestions. Adjust them however you need. So I'd say after each step, say the first 3 steps, spend 1 to 2 minutes in silence and just do the various exercises. If you're reflecting, spend a minute or 2 just reflecting. If you need longer, take more time. Now, when you get to the resting phase, stretch it out to 3 to 5 minutes and just rest. So if you time your practice in this manner, you can do an entire Lectio in as little as 15 minutes. If you have more time and you have the inclination, if your soul is benefiting from the practice, then go longer. There's nothing to say you can't do that. There's nothing to say you can't spend more time with God. So there it is. That's the practice. I'm going to put some links in the description here so you can read up on it if you're interested. There's a lot of good stuff out there, so go check it out, give it a try, and see how this works out in your spiritual life. God bless.